This lecture is an introduction to viruses and viroids and prions, which are basically the first pathogens that we discuss in chapter 20, and then we move on to bacteria. So we'll start with viruses. Okay, so excuse me. One thing about viruses is that they can infect cells of all types of living things. There are viruses that infect plants, viruses that infect animals, of course, which these are the ones that we know about because they affect us. And there are viruses that actually can infect bacteria, and we have a special name for them. We call those bacteriophages. So viruses can infect cells of all types of living things, but we do not classify viruses as a living thing. They are not considered to be a living thing, but they have characteristics in common with living things. So, for example, they contain genetic material in the form of DNA or RNA. They are also able to mutate, and they're able to evolve. We know that, of course, due to our experiences with COVID, due to our experiences with the flu. These are diseases that are caused by viruses that are able to mutate and evolve, which is why it's very difficult to develop a vaccine for them, especially for the flu and the cold virus. Okay, viruses are classified like living things in a certain way, but with all other living things, we classify them starting with their domain. It goes, if you remember, it's domain, supergroup, kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, and species. But viruses are only classified into a family, a genus, and a species. As far as the structure of viruses, they do have genetic material. So they have in their core, they either have DNA or they have RNA. But in Bio 111, we learned that RNA in living things is always single-stranded. That's what this little SS stands for. RNA is always single-stranded, DNA is always double-stranded. In viruses, this is not the case. In viruses, DNA can be single-stranded or double-stranded, and RNA can also be single-stranded or double-stranded. The DNA or RNA core is surrounded by a capsid made of proteins, and then sometimes outside that capsid there's an envelope, and the envelope is composed of the same material as the plasma membrane of cells, of the host cells of the virus, which would consist of a phospholipid bilayer. Viruses are classified as obligate intracellular parasites. That means they have to live intracellular, means inside of a cell, inside of a host cell. Obligate means they must live inside of a host cell. And I use the term live lightly because they really aren't alive, but they must, in order to reproduce, they must do that inside of a host cell. And they're parasites because parasite would be a relationship where the parasite benefits, but the host is harmed in some way. So they're obligate intracellular parasites, meaning they must have a host cell to reproduce. We're going to talk about two scientists in connection with viruses. Louis Pasteur did not discover viruses. We're going to actually talk about Louis Pasteur and his contribution to the study of bacteria. But he was studying the disease rabies, and rabies is something that is caused by a virus. But he was just while he was studying the disease rabies, he realized that the disease was caused by something smaller than a bacterium. So he called it a virus, which is Latin for poison. He was the first to actually use that term. Then we have Dmitry Ivanovsky. And Dmitry Ivanovsky was studying a plant virus called tobacco mosaic virus. Tobacco mosaic virus. And tobacco mosaic virus can infect plants of the tobacco family, but also, so it's not just tobacco plants, it would be tomato plants, and other plants that are in that same family. What he did is he filtered the diseased extract. So what he took is some samples from the plants from the areas that were diseased, and he filtered that extract with a filter that was made of porcelain. It had very small pores. The pores were too small for bacteria to get through. So after he filtered the extract, he added it back to the plants, and they still were infected. They still became diseased with tobacco mosaic virus. So he determined that the pathogen that caused this virus was too small to be a bacterium. So it was only when we developed the electron microscope that we were actually able to see viruses. But of course, we've been able to see viruses now for many years. Now, in Chapter 20, our topics are going to be viruses, viroids, and prions, and then we're going to cover bacteria. There's a section on prokaryotes, which is a review section, and then we'll mention archaea, but we really won't go into a lot of detail on the archaea. So what I want to do is just point out a few important slides that you will need to be familiar with. Slide 7 shows you an illustration of a virus called an adenovirus. And there's an electron microscope image. This is the virus up top. This is the virus 60,000 times bigger than it really is. And then down below, you have an image of the virus. Adenoviruses can cause cold symptoms. They can cause respiratory diseases, I guess you could say. So an adenovirus is a DNA virus, so the core is DNA, and it does contain a capsid that is a polyhedral shape, and it has a protein fiber at each corner, and it's these protein fibers that will interact with the host cell and be recognized by the host cell so that the virus can attack it. But the main thing is be able to look at this image and know that it's an adenovirus. And then here in picture B, we have a bacteriophage. A bacteriophage is also a DNA virus. It is surrounded by a capsid, but as you can see, it almost looks like a spaceship. It has a tail and tail fibers that enable it to kind of dock on the surface of the cell, almost like a spaceship would, and then inject its DNA into the cell. And bacteriophages are viruses that infect bacteria. They only infect bacteria. So we have adenovirus, bacteriophage that you should be able to recognize. And then on slide 8, you see an image of tobacco mosaic virus, which is an RNA virus surrounded by a helical capsid. And then we have the influenza virus, which causes the flu. And it is an RNA virus, as you can see. And then the RNA is surrounded by a capsid. That's the green, the part I'm here in green. And then outside the capsid is an envelope. And that envelope is composed of phospholipids. And within the envelope are spikes, and it is these spikes that enable the flu virus to attach to, for the host cell to recognize the flu virus, and it enables it to infect the host cells, which are in our respiratory tract. So we have 4 viruses that you need to be able to identify just looking at them, looking at the illustrations. Then we're going to move on to, let's see. There we go. Okay, so slide 4 and slide 49 are slides that show, that list diseases caused by viruses or diseases caused by bacteria. So you are not going to have to memorize these slides, but if I give you an example, Let's say, for example, I say smallpox. Is smallpox caused by a virus or a bacterium? And you can see down here that smallpox is something that we're vaccinated against. So smallpox is caused by a virus because you only get vaccines for viral diseases. So HIV, which causes AIDS, genital warts, genital herpes, Zika is a disease caused by a virus, mumps, measles, chickenpox, the common cold, influenza or the flu, SARS, which is severe acute respiratory syndrome, which is the disease we get when we're infected by COVID. Warts, fever, blisters, shingles, these are all caused by viruses. And then I want to point out gastroenteritis and diarrhea. These are actually symptoms, and they can be caused by a virus or a bacteria. And if you go to slide 49, which we're going to do very fast, I don't have a better way to do it. So you can see that gastroenteritis is also a bacterial disease. It also can be caused by bacterium. So I would expect you to know, for example, STDs, syphilis, gonorrhea, chlamydia. These are all bacterial diseases. They're caused by bacteria. So they can be treated with antibiotics, whereas viruses cannot. Just make sure that you look at these tables and that you can recognize any disease and whether it's caused by a bacterium or by a virus, okay? Lastly, we're going to talk about our prions and viroids. Oh, well, actually, okay, before that, this slide is an illustration that shows you how the flu virus mutates over time. In picture A, it shows you the flu virus mutating. Flu virus mutates at a very fast rate, so that is why we have to develop a new vaccine every year to control the flu virus that's infecting people for that year. And what mutates is actually these spikes are called N spikes or H spikes. It is the N and the H spikes that will mutate. And it will actually here you can see the H spikes have mutated. So when the spikes mutate, you have to develop a new vaccine for the mutated form of the flu. Now, picture B shows you how the human flu and the bird flu virus can actually combine. If a host cell is infected with the human influenza virus and the bird influenza virus at the same time, both viruses are going to break down in the host cell so they can be reassorted, and the host cell is designed to produce new virus. So when it does, it will produce a combination virus. And this combination virus can infect humans a lot easier than just the bird influenza virus can. So this is how that happens. Emerging viruses are new or previously uncommon illnesses. Over time, the coronavirus or COVID, Zika, MERS or Middle East Respiratory Syndrome, West Nile virus, Ebola, bird flu. These are examples of viruses that we've called emerging viruses over the years. They're just viruses that are new or previously uncommon, and now they have become a threat. So there are two events that can cause the emergence of a virus, and that is the virus may extend its range. So if the virus was previously in a localized area, like some small little island, but now it has extended its range to many areas of the globe, then that can cause the virus to become an emerging virus. And that happened with COVID. And also genetic mutations may occur. And this happens with the influenza viruses, and it definitely happened and is happening with COVID. These are this is just a picture of the globe, and it shows you different emerging viruses. SARS, COVID-19 started in Asia. and then spread, to the rest of the globe.